Alrighty, welcome everybody to chart number 3. We are using as an example. We have our lovely client here, ready to participate in the reading. It is always hilarious to me. Back when I started doing the live streams over the pandemic, there would be these patterns that emerged, and I was shocked and awed when I would have this random list of people that would ask to be a part of this kind of thing that I was doing. And they would all have similar placements in their charts, even though things were totally random. And the trend continues because this is client number 3, chart number 3 that we're kind of debuting. And all 3 so far have been Virgo risings. And it's just absolutely hilarious to me. Like the patterns are just there. And that's kind of like Astrology 101 is respect the pattern. But I just find it absolutely hilarious. So let's go ahead and show you exactly what we're talking about. So those of you who have followed along with our previous recordings, you'll find this super hilarious as we look at a very similar layout to the chart with Virgo in the first house. Also, the last chart that we did had a cluster in the 9th house as well with Venus and Taurus. So it's amazing to see how people of different ages, different times and places, there are similarities that we can see within personality traits, and it's great confirmation to see how people kind of unfold or unpack these aspects within the life. So with that kind of babble out of the way, how are you, my dear?
I have been great.
Good. Any particular reason for that? Anything kind of going on in your life right now?
Yeah, me and my boyfriend are expecting a new baby.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Definitely something that will continue to be a trend as Jupiter moves into Pisces at the end of the year and lights up your relationship house. Lots of fun stuff in that department for the first quarter.
Great.
But anything about your chart that you wanted to discuss or kind of open up before we get started on the basics? Anything that you're curious about or any placements that you'd like to discuss?
I think we can just dive right in.
Cool. So when we start looking at a chart, I always want to overview the top 4 as baseline personality descriptors. So that's going to be the sun sign, the moon sign, the ascendant, and then the ruler of the chart. That gives us our baseline personality of who we're dealing with and what their essential skills are and where their kind of heart is and where a lot of the primary kind of headspace of the client is going to be, especially for you because you have this lovely stellium in the 9th, which we'll get to and we'll kind of unpack. But first and foremost, you have your sun in Taurus. You have a lot of stuff happening in Taurus, but the sun, first and foremost, the planet of ego, the planet of self, how you radiate yourself through your daily life experience. You project yourself to be extremely steady, extremely steadfast, extremely grounded, very rooted, very practical, routine oriented, all of those, stubborn, all of those.
There we go. Okay, I was waiting for it.
Yeah, fixed earth qualities of Taurus definitely shining through from that perspective. Not only do you have the sun in Taurus, but you also have Mercury in Taurus, Venus in Taurus, North Node in Taurus. A lot happening in the 9th house. So let's unpack that real quick. So the 9th house is the house of astrology, oddly enough. It is also the house of higher education. It is the house of travel. It is the house of foreigners. It is also the house of spirituality. The 9th house is associated with astrology as well, but it's just the house of worldliness. It's the house of expansion. It's the house of kind of getting to know the world around you, but often the other side of the world. Like this is when I see stacks happening or kind of stelliums happening in the 9th house where there's a lot of activity, it's often people who grew up reading dictionaries, who grew up watching National Geographic or Animal Planet or any of those channels, that it's just like any drop of culture that can be absorbed by the person is highly coveted, very prized. Life themes surrounding travel, constantly going back to school, the lifelong learner, all of these types of topics we see when the 9th house is lit up like your chart has it lit up. That makes sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. So not only do you have the sun in this space, but you also have the Lord of your chart in this space. So we'll kind of jump around a little bit. The Virgo ascendant that you have at 28 degrees, which is making a lovely trine to your sun, by the way. Mwah, chef's kiss, fabulous. Also, you have Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, which means Mercury is the ruler of your chart as the Lord of the ascendant, is in Taurus in the 9th house as well. Now, what's interesting about this Mercury in Taurus is that we see this S down here. When you look at a natal chart, Mercury especially, who is prone to go retrograde, may be in a state of directness where you don't see any signifier underneath that kind of section of degree. But in this case, we see that it is S, it is stationed. So this is actually Mercury post-retrograde. So your Mercury is at one of the slowest points, but it's actually kind of at its comeback phase. It's just about to start speeding up, just about to start kind of breaking that slowness, breaking that stagnation, which I think is a really great metaphor for your life. All of this kind of fixed Earth Taurus energy can be really weighed down, very heavy. It's great to kind of build a foundation on, but it can be rather smothering. And this Mercury is like, you know what? I think we're kind of done with that. I think the reason for rocks being so hard is to test how strong we are in order to break them. And really making sure that any mental blockages that you have this go around in this lifetime are shattered completely, and that you don't cling to those really hard and fast rules, that you always leave room for that expansion. You know, Mercury coming out of that retrograde in the sign of Taurus can sometimes be stuck in your ways mentally, can sometimes be very rigid, very dogmatic would be a good word to use because of the 9th house of spirituality and higher learning. It's kind of like the professor that has tenure that's taught the same class over and over and over again for decades, and they don't know anything else because they haven't gone outside of their box in a really long time. And this life, you're breaking that, you're shattering that ceiling that you've kind of encased yourself in energetically.
Sounds right.
Any feedback on that? Any thoughts about how the life has gone so far that you're kind of that you would like to use as an example for that?
Yeah, no, for a while it's been exactly that in every aspect of my life. Like I felt like I've been like, it's kind of stuck in like this repetitive cycle that I've always tried to break and like let off of a little bit. But like just recently, it feels like with like the help of others, I've been able to go outside of that so much easier and like with less anxiety.
Yeah.
Just even with like little tasks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure. One of the ways that, especially with the 9th house, that you're going to get to do that is if your mind tells you something, always assume that it's wrong. And I know that can be a little bit harsh, but always second guess your thoughts. You know, some people have the anxious equivalent of that, where they're constantly second guessing, but your chart is prone to, you know, I've thought it, therefore it is, there is no exception.
Yeah, exactly.
And that can be really tricky. So we want to like respect that the mind has its ways and that there are pre-carved paths of thought. But if you feel yourself in a slump, if you feel yourself stuck, the best thing you can do is grab a book, listen to a podcast, travel, get out of your routine, get out of your comfort zone, and listen to someone else's opinion.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
For sure. And Venus is on your side as well. Venus, goddess of love and abundance. You know, we love to see her in Taurus, which she was in the last chart as well, that we looked at. But Venus in the 9th house, ruling your sun, ruling your Mercury. adds that extra layer of earthiness, but also that extra layer of grace. So working with Venusian concepts, the mother goddess, green Tara, anything that connects you with nature, anything that connects you with the divine feminine is also going to be a theme throughout the life. Yeah, very Mary Magdalene energy. To kind of drive home this house and all of these kind of really important but also monotonous topics, the North Node is here. The North Node is the point of striving in the chart. It is who we are becoming this go around. So this is the type of setup that I really enjoy, because not only do you have your sun here, the ruler of your chart here, Venus is ruling all of them, but we also have the North Node. You have a clear, almost pinned down north on your compass. Like, it's so clear where you are going and how you are to become and who you actually are evolving into. A lot of people search their entire lives and they don't find that, but you've stacked so much of your life direction into the same place, and you've spread out other areas, which we'll get into to kind of cause a little bit of conflict, a little bit of drama, because no chart is without its drama. But I think that one of the assets of your chart in particular is that you've kind of set your ship in one direction, and you've kind of bolted the rudder shut, so you're not changing that direction at all. And that can be really helpful. So at least if everything else falls apart, you feel like you're always making that forward progress because it's so tattooed onto your spirit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns on that?
Not so far.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. So let's go ahead and we'll touch on that Virgo ascendant just for a second, and then we'll move on to the moon, which is really where the fun starts to unravel in your chart. So we have this Virgo ascendant. The Virgo ascendant basically kind of doubles down on all the earth energy. It's mutable earth, so it is a little bit more flexible, but Virgo tends to be the sign of the manager who orders, who organizes, who Marie Kondo's the shit out of stuff, who really focuses on to-do lists and tasks and making sure everything has its proper place. It is the sign to make sure that problems are solved, that issues are fixed, that chaos is controlled. And having that in alignment with your sun makes you a really good fixer. It makes you a really good organizer of information, specifically because of that 9th house. So a lot of your skills may revolve around the idea of putting together lesson plans or organizing group trips or travel, or the idea of you stepping into situations that have a lot of moving parts, a lot of cogs in the machine, and ordering them effectively.
Yep, that's me in a nutshell. Mom of the group.
Yeah, for sure. Not necessarily the mom in terms of like the maternal, but
no, more like
the voice of order.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That I'm gonna pack the
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that we need to kind of distinguish, especially because Taurus, when at its purest and most abundant, it can feel very Cancerian. It can feel very maternal, especially with Venus there. But it does not have that empathetic, sensitive, cry at the drop of a hat, mama energy. It has more mama bear energy, like that kind of earthy, like, these are the rules, we do not break the rules. Right, exactly. So splitting hairs between archetypes. Okay, any questions on the Virgo rising?
No, not. I think that one was pretty.
Yeah. And a lot of your chart really echoes itself nicely. So some of these themes, they'll blend into each other, and it's hard to distinguish between them because they are so kind of supporting of each other, which is great.
Yeah.
But now we get to taste the conflict. Now we get to get into the parts of you that are at odds with all of this Taurus, and we go into this semi-stellium, this grouping of your moon, your Mars, and your Neptune in the 6th house of work. So whenever I see a moon in Aquarius, I always preface this by saying this is one of the most unemotional moons that we can have in our kind of lineup. Aquarius is the sign of the scientist. It's very objective. It's very detail oriented. It is fixed air. It is all about ideas and inspiration and making sure that information is relayed with a purity and a quality that strikes like lightning. It is very detached. Yeah. So to have the moon in this sign, especially in the sixth house of work, it's not a very emotional moon. It's not a very watery moon. And in some of those cases, tapping into your feelings may actually be one of the difficulties of your chart. You may need to induce emotional vomiting on a regular basis just to like feel something, especially if you throw yourself so deeply into these tasks, into these orders, into these routines. Things can start to get pretty gray pretty fast without a lot of water in your chart. We may find that that moon is at a little bit of a disadvantage because the moon can't push and pull the tides if there are no tides to push and pull.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk to me about kind of your feelings in general and how you manage your emotions and what your heart space feels like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I feel like I tend to disconnect myself from all emotions, body, everything. Anytime I get like a little glimpse of something that I don't like. So it's a lot of the time I'm like floating around up here. I really am. And like, there'll be like times where I like realize that and I'll reground myself and like reconnect. But then I'm like, wait, now I'm just like complete other end of the spectrum, like just like swaying back and forth and never really like tapping into those feelings in the middle.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something we've been working on.
Yeah, it's such a weird game to play because you've got all of this earth and all of this air. You know, so you go from one end of the spectrum to the other, but the water in between, that soft spot, just gets missed because you've got fixed earth and fixed air, and you know it's very black and white, yin and yang. You know, go from one end to the other. But where is the mutability? Where is the softness? Where is the in between? Yeah. Aquarius and Taurus don't do well with soft and mushy. They just don't. It's not a place that they feel comfortable with because everything has to be understood, outlined, and in a measurable quantity. And that can be tricky to pull off when it comes to the emotional wellness of a chart. So another kind of tip would be if you were to do any sort of meditation, it may be helpful to do it around water.
Okay.
Yeah. So that may be in the shower, in the bath, by some sort of lake, river, stream, body of water, or even having a glass of water before you meditate or making sure that you stay physically hydrated can sometimes bring in that softer water element to make sure that you literally have that force of fluid around you that the moon can actually start to chew on and work with.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Whenever we see the moon in the sixth house is the house of work and health and pets. So an affinity for animals emotionally, definitely something that can stimulate the heart space. The heart being tied to work, especially with your Mars here. One of the things that you may find therapeutic is just to throw yourself into your duties, whether that's a job that you have or kind of cleaning the house or task mastering yourself to death, giving yourself something to accomplish, something to do, throwing yourself into that work is going to be one of the ways that you kind of scrape out that emotional baggage or tap into that heart space.
Mm-hmm. Great. It's funny because that's when I do always feel best. When I'm like really cleaning, really doing good at work.
Exactly. And that's something that we need to respect. Wherever the moon is located, it's where that soft spot is, it's where that heart is. And I think that recognizing that other people may find that as a coping mechanism, like other people might find that as a like, oh, you're just a workaholic. As long as it's coming up with healthy results for you emotionally, I say just respect that tendency.
Okay.
For sure. But Mars in Aquarius, again, that's a little bit of a taskmaster. You know, that turns you into, if you do step into a managerial role, you need to be aware that not everybody performs at your level, sweetheart. And just because they missed a detail does not mean that they need to be strung up by their thumbs and bled slowly until they learn their lesson. Like that level of aggression, that level of martial kind of cutting perspective is something that needs to maybe be toned down just a little bit.
I think definitely. Sometimes I feel like I'm Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah, for sure. It would not surprise me if Gordon had Mars and Aquarius in the sixth. That is a really good analogy. I adore that. It's, you know, Mars's heat is kind of purified by Aquarius. It's the blade that is so hot that you don't even feel it when it cuts. It just severs. And that can be quite the tool for productivity, but not everybody understands that fierceness, and not everybody, again, just like operates at that level. So just kind of taking that with a grain of salt. We do have Neptune here, though. Neptune is a really interesting planet because it does tend to blur the boundaries just a little bit wherever it's placed. Whenever Neptune is in the sixth, sometimes health issues can be tricky to pin down. Especially with Aquarius ruling your sixth house. This is the body sign of the calves, the skin, as well as the peripheral nerves. This can bring in weird physical issues like skin rashes that are often emotionally focused, or body conditions, or even work situations that are just prone to a certain level of chaos or misunderstanding, as Neptune just gets in and starts to flip things around and make things a little bit less controllable.
Okay.
Any thoughts on that sixth house? Any feedback or things that you've noticed in the life that kind of line up with that or don't line up with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, just that work one hit it right at my head.
Cool. Awesome. So the big issue with, again, that Aquarius aspect is that Aquarius and Taurus do form a really tight square with each other. As Mercury speeds up, it's just a couple of degrees away from squaring that Neptune. And we need to be aware in the chart that there is this kind of juxtaposition in the chart of needing to be so hyper-focused, so fixated on productivity, and then the Taurus side gets neglected. But if you work too heavily into the Taurus aspect of higher education, spirituality, travel, you know, foreigners, and lose yourself in that sphere of life, then the moon starts to get neglected. And there is this tug of war that happens between the two as they vie for your attention.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Cool. Let's go ahead and unpack this Jupiter. So when I saw the stellium packed into your ninth house of spirituality, I immediately looked at this Jupiter in Leo and I thought to myself, oh no, it's a trap. Because as your life develops, having the ruler of your chart in the ninth, trining the sun, trining your ascendant from the ninth, there's so much emphasis on spirituality, higher education, travel, and foreigners. However, this Jupiter in the 12th, the house of hidden enemies, the house of hospitalizations, the house of karmic healing, it's a very underworldy house. is making an applying square via that Mercury. And the sun is ruling that Jupiter. It's also the ruler of your relationships, which we'll get to in a second. But I think one of the things to be aware of in your charts, the kind of hidden enemy of your chart, is spiritual grandstanding. And this idea of, I am better than you. I have a better spiritual connection than you. I have done the work more than you. Therefore, I am above you. Jupiter in Leo tends to be this very pious, holier than thou energy that can sometimes really degrade the chart super fast and take all of that positivity in the 9th house of spiritual growth and turn it into a spiritual toxicity where we start to judge, you know, and judge not lest ye be judged type of things. You know, that Jupiter in Leo can really inflate what should not be inflated and bring a lot of ego where humbleness should exist. So that's something to just be aware of. Like, you're entirely capable of being better than everybody else. That does not mean you should own that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's kind of the big uh-oh of the chart that I see.
Wait, that's the big one?
What?
That's the big one?
That's the big one.
Okay, all right, good. I think that's pretty good.
We'll get to the relationships, which are tied into that. But I think that Jupiter being poised again in the house of things that are hidden, squaring the ruler of your chart, and opposing that Neptune from this via the 12th and the 6th. I think that overall, we just need to be very careful of that Jupiter and understand that, you know, some things are not meant to be inflated, and the ego is one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like, as an example, the ruler of your chart, Mercury, in the 9th house of spirituality, is also ruling the 10th house of fame. You in your chart have what I would consider a perfect setup to be a spiritual influencer.
Awesome. That's the first I've heard that.
An influencer in the travel space, an influence in the higher education space, an influence of 9th house topics. And you having such great affinity in that space, again, it can bring about a holier than thou attitude in those areas. But I think what really needs to be respected is that Jupiter trap. And just saying, the minute that you get too big, if you do not cut yourself back, if you do not prune yourself on a regular basis, Jupiter will do it for you. And there will be a not so controlled burn throughout your chart.
Yeah.
Yeah, because karma's not kind to those who leverage the rules in their favor and take credit where credit is not due.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Jupiter, another aspect of this Jupiter that I think is tricky is that Jupiter is also ruling your 7th house of relationships. So when the ruler of the 7th house of relationships is in the 12th, this can often mean a partner that you're attracted to struggles with a lot of deeper, darker aspects of the self. At its worst, this is constantly being attracted to partners who need their own form of therapy, who are your hidden enemy, who do suffer from things like addiction issues, really deep cutting self-esteem problems, and also just you take them on as pet projects instead of lovers and partners, right? When it's highly expressed, and when you do grow into the strength of that placement, it means that one of the goals of all of your relationships is to stimulate self-growth, is to understand that a partnership is not just about love, it is about growing together, often through trials and tribulations. And the harder the lesson, the stronger the love that comes from it. But again, that can turn super toxic super quick.
Totally.
because we have Uranus here. So Uranus is the planet of unpredictability. Uranus is the planet of natural disasters. Uranus is the planet of all things upheaval. And it's not necessarily something that we like to see in a relationship house. So where is your water? Where is your emotion? It's going to be triggered often by your partner. So it would not surprise me if the people that you choose to live with or spend time with or kind of take into your inner circle have very heavy water placements, but not just very heavy water placements, very chaotic water placements. Things that your fixed air and fixed earth would be naturally poised to counterbalance, which is a blessing. But at the same time, again, it can be tricky because you may be so out of your depth, not having that water in your chart. So talk to me about that.
Oh my goodness. I don't even know what to say. That one was, I think I need a little to process that.
Yeah. Let's also throw in some astrology wisdom here when it comes to relationships specifically. So when we are young, we are exposed to the rawest definition of our signs and placements, right? So earlier on in life, that Uranus and Pisces is going to feel like a water spout in your relationship department. You're going to be swept up by a whole bunch of emotion, a bunch of people that are out of control of their own emotions. And it's going to kind of feel like this force of nature, your partners early on, that are just so awe-inspiring. But the older you get and the more experience that you get in the relationship department, you're going to realize we don't necessarily need all of this emotional drama all of the time. You know, life can survive without that. And being a water spout 24/7, you know, a literal hurricane is not always conducive to healthy emotional exchange.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. As that matures, you know, being attracted to partners who are constantly reevaluating their emotional state, who are going through constructive breakdowns of their emotional space, shattering their heart on purpose to make sure that they don't get into stuck emotional patterns or hold on to too much grief, that can be a really healthy expression of that Uranus and Pisces. But again, keeping up with that emotional change can be one of the hard parts of that, regardless of how mature you get. So studying a lot of partnership books, reading up on a lot of relationships, relationship styles, communication styles in relationships, I think that would be one of the things I would really advise about your chart is understanding that the chaos that can be in relationships does not have to be. But humans are human. And so learning that lesson early can be really beneficial for you. Yeah, holding space for all of that water when you don't have a lot of water in your chart can be somewhat confusing.
It's like it's a part of me, but it's not.
Right, exactly. It's there. It's a force of nature. We all have the water signs in our chart, but they're not necessarily the focus of our chart. So how we process them and how we touch them, and you know, making sure that you start off with the kiddie pool before you jump into the ocean, like that's definitely part of the process. Anything that you would like to talk about? Any planets that you would like to delve into, or areas of life that you're concerned about?
I don't know. Is there anything more we can go over for Jupiter?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Anything in particular that's on your mind?
Just like really bringing in the humbleness, I think.
Yeah.
Like what's best with that whole area? Because that's something that I've noticed that I really need to like rein in or work on. So
one of the things, because Jupiter is ruling your 7th, let the constructive chaos of your relationships humble you.
Okay.
Let your connection with your partner, you know, understands that you can control yourself all day long. You are very good at it. You are very good at telling yourself what to do and following your own orders. You are not supposed to put that level of constraint onto your partner because they operate very differently. Mm-hmm. And understanding that while you may have your shit together, being in a relationship with somebody who does not have their shit together does not nullify your love. It does not make you a bad person, but instead it is part of your growth process. And I think that those trials and tribulations of your relationship and those hidden enemies, those ghosts in the closet of your relationship dynamics, moving forward throughout your life will be kind of the gut check that you need to be like, oh yeah, I forgot, like I'm not perfect. Life is not perfect. Nobody's perfect. You know, shattering that illusion of everything being nice and neat and ordered and systematic. I think
how I think it is in my head.
Right. The messiness of having somebody else in your life and sharing that life with somebody else. A baby is a great example of that. You know, a baby is the embodiment of pure chaos, you know, but the love that can come from that, the literal emotional tour de force that comes from looking a child in the eye, nothing beats it. Absolutely nothing beats it. Now, all of my Cancer placements are just getting riled up, just saying that, you know, just the idea of the people that you choose to have in your inner circle and understanding their plights, their concerns, and bowing to that chaos that takes place through them, I think will be the greatest way to humble yourself from that experience. But also something to keep in mind, because you have so many placements in the 9th, it all circles back around to spirituality for you. So you are not a goddess. You know, you have chosen to be an embodied human this time around, which comes with its own broken bones, its own twisted logic, its own limitations. And although you might be able to achieve great spiritual heights, you might be able to tap into knowledge that other people would not be able to in a million years because of your natal placements. It resonates with you so strongly, but remember, give it back up to the divine. You know, they are working through you as the vessel. You are not the embodiment of that spiritual energy. Right. You are not in control.
I'm running the show.
Yep. You may be an excellent channel. You may be an excellent vehicle. You may be an excellent representation, but the statue is not the deity. You know, so I think it would be a really great practice for you as you move forward. Just remind yourself of that. And if anybody tries to put you up on that pedestal, remember your contract with Jupiter to say, I really appreciate you giving me that authority, but it is not an authority that I am accepting in this life.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. You know, with the astrology stuff, anybody who works in metaphysics and anybody who works in various forms of therapy or healthcare, you know, when somebody is at their weakest and they look to us for guidance or advice or some sort of feedback, you know, they want to put us on a pedestal and they want to say, you know, you are my guru, you are my light, you are the person who is saving me. And that is the definition of dangerous, you know.
Yeah.
So just when that comes forward, let that be your trigger. Like, let that be Jupiter speaking through somebody else to be like, you good? You good, girl?
Check yourself.
Right. Because I'm just poking you just a little bit. You know, this is a trap.
Exactly. This is your test.
Right. Yep. And oddly enough, you'll find that happening just before you take a really big leap spiritually, because that's how it works. So the minute that you start to get that inflation, the minute that you're like, oh wow, all of this expansion, all of this is really great, and then you'll get, it's very much the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, when the witch disguises herself as like the ugly person with the rose, like, will you shut me out, you know? And if you don't heed that warning, you know, then you'll be transformed into something that you had no intention of being.
no, that's a great way of putting it.
For sure. Excellent. And just to kind of echo that fact, Saturn in Gemini in the 10th, you know, Saturn is the planet of restriction. And although the 10th house is the house of success, whenever we find Saturn in the 10th, it's success that happens over time. We're talking about your first Saturn return at 30, your second Saturn return at 60, your third Saturn return around 90. Like those are, we're not talking about success over a couple years. We're not talking about a 5-year plan. We're talking about a 30, 60, and 90-year plan. So really spread it out, really take it slow. Let the experience build gradually. You will look back on yourself now and realize you're a fucking idiot. You know, and that's just something that we need to realize, is that in the human experience, time operates so slowly. But in the moment, we think that we're connected to it all. Does that cover Jupiter pretty well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that knocked any loose ends.
Cool. Any final questions, comments, concerns, things you wanted to go over before we wrap up?
No, Jupiter was really the one that I wanted to revisit, and you knocked everything. So
awesome. Perfect. And just like, this is something that I'll also tell clients, especially if they're really interested in astrology for the long haul and they're interested in doing their homework and not just looking for like a reading, but they're looking to learn through the natal chart. This is a blueprint that should be repeatedly studied. Over the 20 plus years that I've been studying astrology in some way or another, like I keep coming back to the natal chart. I keep looking at my placements, looking at current transits and being like, oh yeah, I forgot. That's my weak spot. Or, oh, wow, I didn't think of myself that way. That adds a new layer of nuance to this sign, this planet, this house, this placement.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's the balance of like between the moon and Taurus. Like if you focus too much over here, then over here's going to get a little neglected. It's like you can't remember everything and know exactly what you need to focus on it and give the same amount of importance to all of them unless you keep looking at them.
Right, exactly.
Keep giving them the attention.
Yep. Let it unfold over time.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this little project that we're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
We will take this video and we will put it on social media so that other people can learn a little bit more about astrology. And for those of you that are watching the recording of this, thank you so much for joining us again. We will continue launching these series and make sure to like, share, subscribe so we can continue putting out more posts.
Woohoo!